Today is March 24, 2024, and we're going to look into non-abidance. For my own edification, I actually did some research on kind of like the history and just kind of the history of it. Excuse me. And so I went online, got on Wikipedia, and came across this. I think it's called the Encyclopedia of Buddhism. All right, so here we go. The concept of non-abidance seems to have originated with the first century Buddhist philosopher Nagarjuna, whose version of sunyata or emptiness entails that entities neither exist nor do they not exist. Okay, so non-abidance here, just to mention, it's used as a concept here, but as we go on further on down this talk, it's not a concept. But I'll just go on here. So in the Diamond Sutra, I'll be mentioning two sutras, the Diamond Sutra and the Platform Sutra, which are, one of the main sources that we use in Chan Buddhism or Zen Buddhism. They're the main Mahayana sutras, I believe. So again, that's the Diamond Sutra and the Platform Sutra of Huineng. So in the Diamond Sutra, classic Buddhist text, it's primarily concerned with the idea of non-abidance. And I kind of read for the first time, actually, I read the Diamond Sutra. I'm going to obviously reread it over and over again. And for those who don't know, the Diamond Sutra is basically the Buddha with one of his senior monks, and they're having this dialogue in front of a large assembly of monks. So this is during the Buddha's time, and it's split in 33 sections. And I'm just going to read, 32 sections. And I'm just going to read something in the last section called, the section is called The Delusion of Appearances. And this senior monk, his name is Subhuti. And so this is the Buddha speaking. Subhuti, someone might fill innumerable worlds with the 7 treasures and give all away in gifts of alms. But if any good man or any good woman awakens the thought of enlightenment and takes even only 4 lines from this discourse, reciting, using, receiving, retaining, and spreading them abroad and explaining them for the benefit of others, it will be far more meritorious. Now, in what manner may he explain them to others? By detachment from appearances, abiding in real truth. So I tell you. And now he recites 4 lines, which I suspect are probably the most famous lines in this sutra. And this is how it goes. Thus shall ye think of all this fleeting world, a star at dawn, a bubble in a stream, a flash of lightning in a summer cloud, a flickering lamp, a phantom, and a dream. And then moving on from that to the Platform Sutra of Huineng, it says in the Platform Sutra of Huineng, which is our 6th ancestor, realizing the depth of this concept, that is non-abiding, was also responsible of a Chan master's sudden enlightenment. The Platform Sutra relates how the spiritual patriarch Huineng was enlightened after hearing his master Hong Ren reciting from the Diamond Sutra. And this is the verse, responding to non-abiding, yet generating the mind. Okay, so from that, I'm going to go to an article I found online called The Zen Practice of Non-abiding. And this article is written by Venerable Guo Jing, a Dharma heir of the late Master Sheng Yen. Venerable Guo Jing is the managing director of the DDM's Chan Hall and the former abbot of the Dharma Drum Retreat Center, New York, as well as of the Chan Meditation Center in Queens, New York. Okay, so he actually wrote this article in 2 sections, and it's all about non-abiding. So we're going to take off from the very beginning here of this article. The Diamond Sutra contains the sentence, "One ought not abide anywhere, and there will arise this mind." Before he became the 6th patriarch, the young Huineng became enlightened when he heard this single sentence. In Chan, we often use a briefer phrase, non-abiding mind arising. This phrase appears within the entrances to Nuang Chang Monastery and the Chan Hall of Dharma Drum Retreat and the Chan Hall of Dharma Drum Mountain in Taiwan, as well as their retreat center in the United States. Master Sheng Yen continually brought up this phrase during long retreats, explaining the concepts behind it, and asked retreatants to practice accordingly. The Chan school places great importance on, quote, non-abiding mind arising, because the intrinsic nature of the mind is exactly non-abiding. If you wish to be enlightened, your actions must be in accordance with, quote, non-abiding mind arising. Not only must you have a clear sense of this idea, but your every action, word, and thought must be in line with it. This idea that all actions of body, speech, and mind should be in accord with the concept of non-abiding is expressed in the saying by Huineng, "As the mouth speaks, so the mind acts." There are many places in the Platform Sutra of the 6th Patriarch that refer to how one should practice non-abiding. All right, so this is what we're going to be talking about, is this practice of non-abiding. And I'll get more into it just further down here. For example, the chapter Samadhi and Wisdom Are One says that those who practice non-abiding will see the emptiness inherent in virtue and evil, beauty and ugliness, enemy and friend, demeaning and argumentative language. Such a person does not engage in or think about reward or injury. Thought after thought, he or she doesn't engage in or think about the previous condition. If the previous thought, present thought, and future thought continue without stopping, this is called bondage. So again, I'll repeat that sentence. If the previous thought, present thought, and future thought continue without stopping, this is called bondage. If, in regard to all dharmas, this is dharmas in the small d, all phenomenon, if in regard to all dharmas, thought after thought continues with non-abiding, this is called unbinding. All right, so that's the theory for the day. I just want to just talk a little bit about that. But here I came across this more concrete definition, and this I found in the Encyclopedia of Buddhism. And I think this is where this whole talk started, was from this definition. Non-abidance is the practice of avoiding mental constructs during daily life. Although it's not exclusive. I mean, it's obviously part of our Zazen as well. But again, non-abidance is the practice of avoiding mental constructs during daily life. That is, other than while engaged in meditation. And finally, Gu Go, whom I'll be reading from his book, Silent Illumination, one of the sentences in that book says, non-abiding is just a Chan way of saying non-grasping. All right, so I want to get back to this non-abidance, the practice of avoiding mental constructs during daily life. One of the first things I'll always mention for whoever comes here for training is that we work in silence here at the center. I'm always heartened when I walk around the center sometimes to get something, to hear the kitchen say in silence, which, from my experience, that's always been a struggle. If you're a head cook and you get a lot of volunteers and talkative trainees, to keep the kitchen focused and work in silence as much as possible. Of course, in Sesshin, we don't have that choice. We don't there's very little talking that goes on. But it's really hard to, we all know this, it's practically impossible to be into our practice, doing our practice when we're engaged in conversation. Zen Master Hakuin, meditation in the midst of activity is 1,000 times superior to meditation in stillness. Another one of the training aspects we have at the center too is moving around in the buildings, making sure lights are turned off when they need to be turned off. I used to kind of get annoyed a little bit with sometimes because it would be repeated over and over again, mostly by Roshi, and I was starting to feel like this was some kind of obsessive compulsive disorder. But it's really a good practice. When you're walking around in the buildings at home or at work, say, and if there's a light that's on, it's not necessary, then you turn it off. And you notice that the light was on and it's unnecessary. It means you're not lost in thought. It means that you have that awareness when you move around. So that's detaching from mental constructs. Enough at least to notice that the light's on, needs to be turned off, so you turn it off. Something I said a few times in Sesshin, we always give these encouragement talks just before we have breakfast or lunch or dinner. And I've used this analogy of just imagine the infinity symbol. So I'll talk a little bit about this. So it's basically, we're doing our Zazen, we're freeing ourselves from our thoughts or whatever comes up in the mind. And what we like to stress, especially during breaks in the work period, is to stick with your practice. The more you can return to your practice during, the break, whether it's resting or having lunch, whatever we're doing during our work period, that by returning over and over again, that is actually going to help our sitting practice when we get back into Zendo. So it's kind of like this infinity symbol. We have these term intensive that we do twice a year. And during the winter, it's longer. We did a 6-week term intensive. And in the fall, it tends to be shorter, say 3 or 4 weeks. For those who've never done a term intensive, we basically, people sign up and they sign their name at the bottom of the line and say, all right, I'm going to commit to one of the sole requirement, and then there are other things we can do in our term intensive, but it's to do extra sitting. That we have no choice. And then after that, we can do other things like chanting before meals, or can't think of any right now, or doing a yoga practice to improve our sitting posture, have a daily yoga practice. So we make these commitments for a shorter or longer period of time. And then we meet once a week and talk about how things are going in the term intensive with our commitments. So every once in a while in our application, I'll get someone who will write something like, I want to be more attentive. I'm going to work at being more attentive during the day. Yeah, that's something we all want to do. We want to be awake during the day, during our daily activity. But that is just a little too abstract. It's too abstract, basically. And so what would be much more practical in terms of working on that is, say, when we're driving, we're not going to listen to a podcast or radio. We're just going to drive. Or same thing if we're doing the dishes, or we're not listening to anything on the radio or not listening to music. We're just cleaning. There was someone in this most recent term intensive, that was her commitment, was for this 1 week, 1 hour a day, she would just do cleaning in silence in the house. All right, so that's a much more practical way of working on this non-abidance, getting away from our mental constructs while we're working. I think we see this non-abiding much more so in kids. If you see kids in the playground playing, there's just this continuous flow. It's just a continuous flow. They don't get caught up in their thoughts the way we do when we're working or playing. I have this memory. I visited a friend in San Francisco, speaking of kids, and she had 2 daughters. She has 2 daughters, and I think one of them was 7 years old. And I was just hanging out in the kitchen while the mother was, I think, getting lunch ready. And this 4-year-old, 5-year-old, she just wanted to get to her mother. So she rushed on the tile of the kitchen floor, and she slipped, and she went literally straight up and then fell right on her bum. But she got right back up, and then she went right towards her mom. Like, there was no kind of this, that hurts, or she wasn't crying. It was just instant, She didn't get caught up in any of what was ever going on in the mind. She was empty. She just got up, just rushed right to her mom, and got a hug. Okay, so I'm going to be reading from this book, Silent Illumination, A Chan Buddhist Path to Natural Awakening. And it is by Guo Gu. And again, I found a good little biography of Guo Gu from Wikipedia, excuse me. So his original name is Jimmy Wu. He was born in 1968. And he's also known as Guo Gu. He's a Chan teacher and a scholar of Buddhism. He was the basis of the American 1980s hardcore bands Death Before Dishonor, and in parentheses it says the original, and Judge. After his youthful days in hardcore straight edge, he returned to Buddhism and became a monk under Chan Master Cheng Yen. In 2000, he left monasticism to pursue academia. He received an MA degree in Chinese Buddhist studies from the University of Kansas in 2002 and a PhD from Princeton University's Department of Religion in 2008. He is currently an associate professor of religion in Florida at Florida State University, teaching courses in East Asian religious traditions, and especially Chinese Buddhism and late imperial Chinese cultural history. So Guo Gu practiced with the late Chan Master Sheng Yen from 1982 until the latter died in 2009. He was Sheng Yen's translator, attendant, and assistant in leading intense Chan retreats. He first received Inca, a seal of approval of his experience of Chan, in 1995, and final transmission in 2007. And he's currently the founder and Dharma teacher of the Tallahassee Chan Center in Tallahassee, Florida, and founder of the Dharma Relief Project. And we'll be picking up here in his book, page 23. In the Platform Sutra, there it is again. In the Platform Sutra, Master Huineng provides 3 principles to deal with non-grasping: no thought, no form, and non-abiding. These 3 principles are antidotes to our grasping of our inner world, outer relations, and identity. In order to appreciate these 3 principles, so again, it's no form, no thought, no form, and non-abidance, we need to recognize grasping as a deep-seated feeling tone. It's a sense of lack, a thirst for something. Of course, being discontented can bring about change for the better in our lives, but here I'm referring to a habit of possessiveness, which arises from self-grasping. Then Huineng says, good friends, since the past, this teaching of ours has first taken no thought as its principle, no form as its essence, and non-abiding as its foundation. No thought means to be without, quote, thought in the midst of thinking. No form is to transcend form within the context of forms and appearances. Non-abiding is your fundamental nature. All worldly things are empty. And then Guogu goes on. Thoughts, feelings, and narratives are what we grasp internally. Form is what we grasp externally, and this can include our bodies, objects, environment, status, wealth, and appearances. None of these objects of grasping are in and of themselves bad. Sometimes they are needed to help us navigate through life and improve our circumstances. However, when our grasping is driven by possessiveness and obsession, it brings about suffering for ourselves and others. Reminded me of this quote from Sheng Yen, his teacher, on love. Genuine love is a selfless giving. Give without expecting something in return. Only when one is completely unselfish does genuine love arise. This genuine love is Buddhist compassion. Non-abiding, back to Gugo. Non-abiding is just a Chan way of saying non-grasping. Everything is fluid, changing, open to opportunities. This is how things, including ourselves, are. Nothing is fixed, rigid. How can anything be grasped? Grasping and rejecting are always based on our self-referential obsessions. If we are captivated or repulsed by whatever comes up in our practice, then it gains power over us and the problem becomes worse. When difficulties arise, it is important to see them clearly, accept them, work with them, and let them go. The true nature of things is non-abiding, fresh, and dynamic. Relating to our feelings and thoughts through grasping and rejection ruins everything. If we grasp at them, then we're going against their nature. We suffer and probably cause everyone around us to suffer. When we grasp and reject, we're ultimately concerned with me, I, and mind. We're thinking self-referentially. All right, so now he goes through these three principles. And the first one is no thought. How do we relate to our inner experience? In the above platform scripture passage, quote, no thought, it doesn't mean cutting off thinking. It means there is no fixation with regard to the free flow of our thinking. We don't need to reify or solidify what we experience into my thoughts, my feelings. If self-grasping is present, then thoughts don't flow. When we suffer, we are caught in the middle of the stories that we're fabricating, and in this way, we prolong that suffering. Ordinarily, our happiness is completely dependent on thoughts, narratives, concepts, and words. So if we have negative self-disparaging thoughts and we automatically identify with them, then we feel very unhappy. If someone praises us and we identify with that, then we will feel very happy. This is quite normal. Unfortunately, when we're tethered to our thoughts, we actually lose our autonomy. Like a puppet, we are tied up by the strings of our thoughts, completely at the mercy of our narratives. The problem is not with our thoughts. This is such an important point. Repeat it. The problem is not with thoughts. The problem is the strings that the problem is the strings that tie us to those thoughts are grasping and rejecting. And I'm going to give a couple of examples of this, no strings attached in a way with our thoughts. And going back to his Dharma brother here, Gu Jing, going back to the Zen Practice of Non-abiding. And this is one of the examples he gives. Non-abiding means to observe feelings and thoughts that arise from your body and mind. Only observe them. Know they occur. Don't react to them, interfere, or prevent them from happening. And here's the analogy. It's like watching a basketball game. You can't just jump onto the court to interfere with the players. Let the players play their own game. You just quietly enjoy it, or you just quietly observe it. The sensations and thoughts in your body and mind are like the players on the court. You enjoy watching them. You don't pay special attention to one particular player. Rather, you watch the game in its entirety. And so, of course, what we're doing with our practice, when we're not non-abiding with the practice, is we do jump into the court and get involved with the players in the game, when all we need to do is just observe what's going on in the mind. And here's the other example that he gives. When a person passes by a mirror, there is only a reflection of a person passing by. If a bird flies by, the mirror reflects only that. A person and a bird appearing, the mirror just reflects a person and a bird. If there is no person and no bird, then the mirror just reflects the environment. So the mirror is our mind, right? So the mirror will not choose which part it reflects. It reflects whatever is in front of it. It will not interact or react or have an opinion. Going back to Guogu. Here, thought has two levels of meaning. The first refers to our mental activity, our brain's natural ability to think, symbolize, conceptualize, cognize, and perceive. The second level refers to our fixation on our own constructs, notions, and storylines. In other words, our tendency to reify ideas and feelings into discrete realities, into things. All right, so there is no problem with our natural ability to think, imagine, and so on. The problem is when we start to solidify our thoughts and feelings into fixed notions of me, I, and mine. So there it is again, that string. The string on the puppet. If we don't pursue our thoughts. So in other words, like Guogu just said, there is no problem with thinking when we need to think, solving problems. Although some of those problems can be resolved through emptying the mind when we're doing Zazen, and the answer will just appear, the resolution. So we're not talking about cutting off the thinking process, obviously. It's everything else. Roshi Kapleau was always fond of saying, there's a difference between thinking and thoughting. To practice, we have to first expose our sense of lack of our need to process something. Don't identify with these subtle feeling tones. At the same time, don't block them either. There are reasons why we feel and think the way we do. Our thoughts and feeling reveal something about us. Recognizing them as they arise and not grasping or rejecting them is itself a way to own and embrace them. When we can allow ourselves to be with them, we can start to work with them, to work through them, and to let go of them, which means they no longer have a strong hold over us. Okay, so again, this observing, I'm going to go back to this article I read from last year. Excuse me if some people have heard this one before, but it is kind of like the same idea with our practice, with how we connect with our thoughts, observing the basketball game, and it's the same thing with our feelings and emotions. So this is an article called Lotus Therapy. It was in the New York Times in May 27, 2008, and it's by a Benedict Carey. And it's basically about therapy and mindfulness practice. And it starts off by saying, the patient sat with his eyes closed, submerged in the rhythm of his own breathing, and after a while noticed that he was thinking about his troubled relationship with his father. And he says, I was able to be there, present for the pain, he said, when the meditation session ended. And he says, to just let it be what it was without thinking it through. And then the therapist nodded. Acceptance is what it was, he continued, just letting it be, not trying to change anything. That's it, the therapist said. That's it, and that's big. This exercise in focused awareness and mental catch and release of emotions has become perhaps the most popular new psychotherapy technique of the past decade. For years, psychotherapists have worked to relieve suffering by reframing the content of patients' thoughts, directly altering behavior, or helping people gain insight into the subconscious sources of their despair and anxiety. The promise of mindfulness meditation is that it can help patients endure flash floods of emotion during the therapeutic process, and ultimately alter reactions to daily experience at a level that words cannot reach. Something a little more specific here. After mastering control of attention, some therapists say a person can turn mentally to face a threatening or troubling thought about, say, a strained relationship with a parent, and learn simply to endure the anger or sadness and let it pass, without lapsing into rumination or trying to change a feeling, a move that often backfires. So, first thing that comes to my mind is anger. I'm not going to be angry. I'm not going to experience anger. And this obviously can operate on a very subconscious level. I've always noticed that people have a tendency to, when they are angry, you might see a smile come up when they're angry, but a smile on the face might come up on the side of their mouth there. They might, they just don't want to experience that anger, the anger that they're experiencing. And of course, through our Zazen, as the months go on and years go on, that it's kind of like the floodgates, Hopefully it all doesn't happen all at once, but slowly but surely we start to connect more and more with our anger. And what do we do with that anger? We don't do anything with it. We just experience it in our bodies and not react or suppress it like we used to. One woman, a doctor who had been in therapy for years to manage bouts of disabling anxiety, recently began seeing a therapist in Austin, Texas, who incorporates mindfulness meditation into her practice. This patient had plenty to worry about, including a disabled child, a divorce, and what she described as a, quote, harsh internal voice. After practicing mindfulness meditation, she continued to feel anxious at times, but told Miss Logan, this is a therapist, I can stop and observe my feelings and thoughts and have compassion for myself. And finally, it's a shift from having our mental health defined by the content of our thoughts. I'll say that again. It's a shift from having our mental health defined by the content of our thoughts to having it defined by our relationship to that content, and changing that relationship by sitting with, noticing, and becoming disentangled from our definition of ourselves. So just observe, observe, observe. And don't do anything with it. Whatever arises in the mind, rises in the mind. And we don't react to it. We don't grasp it. We just observe it. It's very hard to do, especially when we're stuck in some kind of emotional obstruction or we're experiencing something. It's very hard not to react and try and make a solution. Try and fix the problem. When there's nothing to fix, it's just all about observing and experiencing whatever rises in the mind. And by doing that, we get beyond the thoughts. We get beyond the feelings. And it's kind of like a weather pattern. I've used this before as well. John Sensei told me this. It was very helpful, especially just before a sesshin. I was extremely anxious about and had a lot of anxiety. And he basically said, it's just what you're feeling right now. It's just like a weather pattern. It comes, it blocks the sun for a period of time. If you don't grasp on it, if you don't try and fix it, if you don't try and do anything with it, it will just pass. And it did. We generally believe that the way we think about ourselves is how we actually are. We cannot distinguish between our thoughts and the reality of who we are. Moreover, we tend to treat ourselves according to whatever subtle feelings we happen to have at the moment. If we're feeling negative, we don't see anything good about ourselves. When we're in a good mood, even a shortcoming is adorable. This projection happens so quickly that we don't usually recognize it. But this subtle feeling is what the passage above calls, quote, thought. So when you feel something within, recognize it, but don't reify, identify, and solidify it into, quote, thing. Definitely don't build a whole narrative around it. This is the meaning of practicing no thought amid thoughts. Our thought now being no thought, our dancing and songs are the voice of the Dharma. It's learning to have a healthier relationship with our thoughts instead of becoming conditioned by them. Sometimes we build a whole narrative around some spiritual experiences we've had. This is another way we reify the natural flow of thoughts. When we have powerful experiences and want a teacher to verify it as awakening, then this very need for verification is a form of self-grasping. If a person has, quote, woken up from a dream, why would they need verification from someone else? Why would there be a need to announce to the world that they've woken up? The free flow of our minds is the wonderful dynamic activity of our creativity and intellect. There's no need to stop thoughts. At the same time, it is necessary to develop the ability to be free from thoughts. One way to do that is to cultivate through meditation the ability to bring the mind from a scattered state to a concentrated state, and from the concentrated state to a unified state. And then to free our grasping of even the unified state, the place where subject and object emerge. Next section is no form. No form is a teaching on how to relate to the external world. Ordinarily, we grasp appearances and characteristics as discrete things, but there's really not a single thing. Nothing is fixed. There is no fixed objective reality. I have to say with this, nothing is fixed. I think that's one of the first kind of insights we can have about our practice, is once we start to notice what's going on in the mind, how everything changes in our minds, it's not so hard. Once we see everything, how everything is so impermanent with what's going on in the mind, whatever's going on in the body-mind through our Zazen, then it's not that hard to kind of see how everything outside us is impermanent as well. Kind of reinforces our faith in the practice when we start to realize how everything is so impermanent. To transcend form within the context of forms is a teaching on not denying or divorcing ourselves from form, but allowing all appearances and characteristics to be without us contaminating them with our projections, ideas, or feelings. We must engage with the world while at the same time we have no vexations about it. Then there's room for improvement. We try our best to improve the world of form. When things need to change, we make the change. But emotional afflictions only lead to some vexations. They can contaminate and even ruin everything we see, hear, smell, taste, or touch. We must engage with the world while at the same time we have no vexations about it. It reminds me of this Zen saying, being part of the world but not of it. That's the Zen way. Again, being a part of the world but not of it. All right, well, I'm starting to run out of time, so I'm going to skip past some sections and just go right into this last section called non-abiding. It's very short. Non-abiding is relating to ourselves and others in an open and receptive way where we allow everything to flow and recognize that each moment is alive, vibrant, filled with infinite possibilities. This is actually the nature of experiencing the workings of Buddha nature and the direct expression of natural awakening. For this reason, non-abiding is your fundamental nature, as Huineng said. It is who we are, free from the internal shackles of thoughts and feelings and the external conditioning of form. With this non-abiding, the times that I see most in myself and in others is after sesshin. After 7 days of sitting together, one of my favorite times is the post-sesshin brunch. So a lot of staff and volunteers who've been in sesshin, and they'll be having breakfast. We have this breakfast on a Sunday here at Arnold Park, and so we need to get it ready. And it's now at 9 o'clock. We get breakfast ready. And I'm managing the kitchen. I just love standing there and watching everything flowing. You know, no one's bumping into each other. And some people are even talking, of course. It's after sesshin, we can talk. But everything is flowing. Everything is working. It's kind of like a beehive, you know. It's poetry in motion. I love seeing that. And the reason things are going so well it's because of all the sitting that we've done, and we've gotten beyond a lot of our mental constructs that we've kind of flushed out during sesshin. Like I said, it's one of my favorite times. And there was this one particular instance too after a 7-day sesshin. The people I was working with in the kitchen, just everything just flowed so well. I had this one particular person who talked an awful lot, and she didn't. And it was after sesshin, and I think we got lunch out on time every single day that particular week, because sometimes it would be late. So just this non-abiding, it's this non-grasping, basically. So brought to the kitchen, working in the kitchen has always been the best training. You can't afford to be confused when you're in the kitchen. You have to make decisions. It's like such a pressure cooker, because you need to get the lunch out on time. And if confusion is one of your default modes, the whole hemming and hawing and not making decisions, that can be really difficult when one is working in a place like the kitchen. This is a great quote from T.S. Eliot that I can't seem to find. Jonathan, thank you. There's non-abiding right there. All right, T.S. Eliot. Between the idea and the reality, between motion and the act, falls the shadow. Between conception and creation, between emotion and response, falls the shadow. For me, that shadow is the confusion, the hesitating, not committing to a decision, not responding, not acting when what's needed is to act. In sesshin, one way one can hesitate is going to doksan. Should I? There's that song from the class. Should I stay or should I go? A breakthrough of that is to not, you don't have to think about whether you go or not. When the bell rings, if you go, you go. If you don't, you don't. You don't have to make that decision, even if you don't have anything. This was such a helpful realization when because I was hemming and hawing a lot, trying to think whether I should go or not. So I'm like, just let Moo. If just let Moo make the decision, just when the bell rings, if I go, I go. If I don't, I don't. And that just small things like that can make a big difference in our practice. It's getting beyond those mental constructs. Yogi Berra, baseball player, when you come to a fork in the road, take it. So I heard this a long time ago. Someone else give that encouragement, and I was like, I don't get it. Like, what do you mean do you take the left or the right? You take the left or you take the right, but you take the fork in the road. And actually, it was a larger quote than that. It wasn't just, before that, it says, the full quote, it turns out, is stay humble, trust your instincts, more importantly, act. When you come to a fork in the road, take it. And I'll finish with this last quote I've often heard from Roshi Kapleau. He who hesitates is lost. That is, they're lost in thought. Just get beyond that. Don't fight your thoughts. Don't repress your thoughts. And don't cling to your thoughts. I think for most of us, the harder part is clinging to our thoughts. It's just observing them. All right, that's all I have. So time for a question and answer, if there are any.
Give us a second.
Oh yes, thank you, Keith. I almost forgot. So yeah, Keith and I are just going to turn off, do a few things, so hopefully the question and answer period will run smoothly. Jisai, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, great.
Can you, number 2, can you put that back?
Yeah, Jonathan will help me out here. Thank you.
We might need it a little higher so we can see your face better, Truman.
Oh, okay.
Perils of being tall.
So many devices. Josiah, let me know how it looks.
There we go.
Yeah?
There we go. That's great.
Okay, good. All right. Yes, Minduk.
Yes, sir. Firstly, thank you so much for very, very valuable talk today. For the 3, to me, very, very important fundamental of Zen Buddhism. First, no thought. Second is non-violent, and the other no form. Yeah. And you also mentioned to the way for practicing that do not grasp. Do not grasp. Yeah. When we do practice. And but in fact, when you see ourselves, when we face to the object, for example, our eyes when we see some objects, our ears when we hear something, and intentionally or unintentionally, we also have the perception. And how is the way for maybe the completely cut it off, the perception from the sense and the object?
Right, how to cut that off, how to cut off the perception. It's, yeah, so the question was hearing a sound or we have an object in our mind in front of us, how do you cut off that perception? Yeah, the cutting off is kind of like, I've always had a problem with that word cutting off because it seems to suggest like pushing it away or trying to make it disappear. If there's something, and the object in the mind could be like a makyo, this phenomena that arises and gets stuck in our mind, and it's always comes down to the same thing. Just get back to whatever the practice that you're doing, whether it's a koan, and it's going to have its, it's kind of like that weather pattern. Let's say, I don't know, you see something in front of you, or you're thinking, you have a thought about the past. This is something that gets stuck in a lot. Kind of regret or nostalgia is you're not trying to stop it. You just get back to mu. I mean, I know we say this over and over again, but as time goes on, it just doesn't have the same kind of hold on us anymore. And it just goes away quicker if you just get back to mu, if you just get back to hu, or whatever the practice is. And that's why shikantaza is such a, I kind of, there's, well, I was going to get into other Zen centers and their practice of just following the breath. Oh, well, I'll just say that. Just a lot of people, when they start off the practice, they'll start off with the breath practice. I always find that kind of insane in a way, that they don't have like a counting of the practice, because you're just kind of it can be done. Obviously, people have done it, but it's just so much. I think it's just so much more effective when we start off with these counting practices, because then you can use that as a tool. You just do the counting and put your attention on something, and then that's when you start to notice the mind. And so, yeah, it comes back to. I just kind of rambled on and on and on, but it really is just going back. It's so simple. Just return your attention to the practice and things will pass. I don't know if I answered your question, but yeah. And it just gets easier, it's just like dust in the mind. You're just there and the thoughts pop up, and as long as you don't give life to it, the next thought will pop up, and the next thought will pop up, and it's just going back and back over and over again. Yeah, anybody else, actually? Dwayne.
but just forget about the mind and pay attention to the body. I found a lot of wisdom there. A good example is the way people manage their affairs on a dance floor or in a skating rink. Everybody has their own intention to have a good time and thinking about things, but they really need to center themselves in the body, and that creates its own flow with all the other people centering in their bodies. And nobody goes wham, except every great once in a while on a skating rink or in a dance floor.
Yeah, I like to call that the samadhi of play. You're just not, and it's just like that little girl, when you do fall, you just get right back up and go. I think John Sensei gave a Dharma talk a long time ago when he was head of Zendo about skiing, and he was talking about relaying skiing and practice, and he's saying, if you're not falling, you're not doing the practice. It's just kind of this natural, I from what I recall, or I suspect he was talking about having the body being relaxed,
Anyone on Zoom?
Jisai, anyone?
Is there anyone that has a question or a comment for Truman? If you do, just go ahead and unmute yourself. All right, so back to the Zendo. I see nobody moving towards their screen, so back to you guys.
Okay.
And Arnold Park.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Going back to the Yogi Berra quote, where it's just if you see a path, like follow your instinct, just take it. What if you have a clear mind, but your instincts are still telling you to go both ways?
Just go.
Okay.
Yeah, whatever, left or right, whichever way you take, you go that way and just stick with it, and not say, I should have gone to the right instead. You just go.
Thank you.
It looks like with Chapin Melzendo, was there a question coming from Chapin Melzendo?
This is Chapin Mill, and no, we don't have a question. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Ed. Again, I'd wish I'd talked a little more about the kitchen, because, like I said, working in the kitchen was such a great training environment for me. And especially the first year or so, people were asking me questions all the time. Where does this go? Where did that go? And there are a lot of times I found myself hemming and hawing when sometimes I didn't know where things went. But when you're just being pounded away with questions, and you have to make a decision, I got a lot better at that, and it was getting beyond that shadow, not being stuck in that shadow of being afraid of making a mistake or making the wrong decision. As time goes on, things flow so much better, and you get out of the way and you make that decision. All right, maybe it wasn't the right decision sometimes, but it doesn't matter. You made the decision and you went through it. Sometimes you do need to think through things and figure things out, and you need to sit with it. But especially when I was in the kitchen, it wasn't that kind of solution. It was like just making that decision over and going, yes, that's it. Put it over there or whatever, getting beyond the shadow. That's a good way of putting it. Getting past the shadow of confusion and doubt, and just go full on. Just take that fork in the road.
that's it, then